Hey kids, have you ever heard of the Warhammers? This was a very popular game back in the day, and if you've never heard of it, maybe you should crawl back under the rock you've been living under for the last 40 years, because man, there's tons of videos all over the YouTubes dealing with this particular game. It's a classic rank and flank, or rank and file if you prefer, and man, it's really popular, but there's something about this game that nobody's really doing on the YouTubes, and we're going to do it. Let's flip to the back of the book, to the section called, you'd think I would have put the Post-it notes to have that page going, but I didn't. That would imply a level of planning that is a little beyond the joy of wargaming. There we go. Back in the appendices, the very first one, campaigns. And look, we've got, you could do campaigns where you score points for winning a battle. And then look, we've got a branching campaign, which is like a choose your own adventure path, except that the path that you choose depends on who wins what. And then, we've got this thing called ladder campaigns. And then you've got this map-based campaign that's really not a map-based campaign. It's more like Necromunda because here's your territory chart. And yeah, I guess, you can go to war over these, but the thing is, most of these campaigns are written with an eye towards, we've got multiple people, and we want to minimize the amount of tracking that has to go on between battles because you never know who you're going to fight next, and we want to make it as flexible as possible. Now, I'm not here to tell you that this is the wrong way to run a campaign. I'm just here to tell you that all of these represent campaigning on easy mode, or I should say big groups mode. We have another mode of campaigning, and if I was a little better prepared, I'd have a copy of Bill Sylvester's Solo Wargaming Guide. I don't. We're going to run a very different style of map-based campaign, and it's going to take me a little while to lay out the ground rules and show you guys how this is done. But you've seen it done here in the House of Wargaming, here on the Joy of Wargaming numerous times in Black Powder, and we even did a chainmail campaign using a very similar system. Well, now we're going to up our game, and we're going to try playing a Warhammer campaign in a style that you've never seen before. Our setup is also going to be very different because we're not going to create a couple of maps, and we're not going to get our armies mobilized at the same time, maybe at the same time, or one's attacking another, and maybe there's a delay. This time, we're going to do things a little bit different because I have chosen from the Ravening Horde supplement, Get You By Army List for Warhammer, 2 forces, and we're going to do the Imperial Crusade against the Undead. And, I kind of went back and forth on this because we're not really big on the lore here. We know it, we follow it, we get it. But the old world is not our world. Heck, I'm playing these battles out in 15 millimeters. You think I really care about the proper color of my lizard, man? I don't think so. But the one thing I did want to do is hew as close to these as possible. And there are 2 undead lists in here. For those of you that are not aware, one of the undead lists is called the Tomb Kings of Khemri. This is an Egyptian-flavored army. And these are kind of the dry, dusty dead. These are more, I don't know what you would call it. Maybe like thinking undead, because here's the critical thing that I want to point out right away, is that when you've got your core units here for these guys, there we go. See, look, you've got skeletons, and these skeletons may have a bow. All right, well, that's fine, and they're just kind of the dry, dusty hordes. Also, no, I don't think there's zombies in this list. The special units are things like powerful tomb guards and mummies and chariots is a big one. Then you've got the vampire counts. And the vampire counts is very much more a Romanian style. You've got your zombies, you've got your ghouls, you've got banshees wailing away, dire wolves. Oh, this is good stuff. My collection is far more suited to vampire counts. So we're essentially going to do a vampire counts versus the Empire. Now, of course, my empire is the Broman Empire from the city of Brome, and they're going to be launching a campaign against the vampires. We'll get to that. Let me show you the map that we're going to use. Well, since we're already talking about the units, let's continue talking about the units. It's a little hard to know where to start outlining a campaign like this. So I'm going to go through it in essentially the same process that I went through the creation of it. The first thing I sat down to decide was, well, what are the forces that are available to the Crusader Kingdom? Since this is a crusade of the Holy Roman Empire against the forces of darkness, what do the Bromans bring to the party? And how do we organize those forces in a way that will be interesting, in a way that will lead to, I should probably point out, the goal here is to create tabletop battles that are interesting, that are organic. They may not be fair, but they will all have some meaning and some import. And by introducing the campaign system, and by introducing a consistent roster for the Empire, we have to pay attention to our casualties in ways that most Warhammer players do not. This may be similar to some other professional products. When I mention that, I'm trying to do a different kind of Warhammer campaign, people come crawling out of the woodwork to tell you, you should check out the General's Compendium. You should check out this campaign, that campaign, that. Okay, that's great, but the General's Compendium is like $60 plus shipping. I ain't spending that kind of money. I got Bill Sylvester. I got everything I need right there. What I got is like 30 years of experience I'm drawing on. So bear in mind, that's really what we're trying to do, is generate some interesting choices and some, shoving armies around a map so we can feel like a commander-in-chief, and then zeroing in when the armies meet and seeing what happens. So it's going to be a war of attrition where the Empire has to move fast, and you'll see that when we look at the map here shortly. We'll go down the roster of the Empire. Then I think we'll take a look at the forces that may or may not be available to the Undead, and then we'll take a look at the map. And you'll see what I mean when I say this stuff is all connected. I'll also point out, the names that I have chosen for both the good guys and the bad guys are not necessarily a reflection of whether I think the inspiration for those names are good people or bad people. I am paying homage to a certain group of people. I'm not going to tell you who they are. You get to figure that out for yourself. There'll probably be spoilers in the comment section. So with all that out of the way, I think we can now get to the fact that the main general for our Broman force is going to be General Samout Nenarip. And he's got a war horse. We gave him a sword of battle. I have no idea how many points there are available here. I didn't even calculate it. I just said, look, I need a general. I definitely want a high priest. And then I got one battle wizard. So we got a level 4 wizard, a level 2 wizard, and then I got 3 captains. So what this does is it allows me to say, well, I got a potential of 6 leaders, but really what I can do is break out my forces in a number of different ways. And we're going to decide what strategy they'll follow, how they're going to sort out, and what their ultimate goal is in a bit. Continuing down the list, and then to give captains, so our high priest is Priest Rickley. We've got Captain, who is this? Cavett Accessatore, Captain Thorn Jaketon, Legan Manstill. And to give these guys a little bit of personality just on the tabletop, I've given Captain Cavett a sword of striking, which gives you +1 to hit. I've given Captain Thorn a sword of might, so he's got a +1 to his strength. He'll be hitting with strength 4 instead of strength 3. Not huge, but the captains are already pretty tough, so it kind of gives them a little bit of flavor themselves. And then we've got our battle wizard, Neil McGram. Now he's a level 2 wizard. Of course, our priest, this is a crusade after all, is going to be a priest of the heavens, and then we'll use a wizard of light. And the wizard, because he's merely a wizard, probably some kind of living saint, not quite as powerful as the holy man. Then we've got a couple of great cannons, and we could probably name those cannons as they did back in the day, but we're not gonna. We've got a total of 10 knightly order types. Knights of the Lamb. In Ravening Hordes, they're called Knights of the Wolf, but we're going to call them Knights of the Lamb for reasons that should be obvious if you're not a complete plank. Obviously, the knightly order, these guys have lances, and our Knights of the Lamb are the guys with the hammers. So we got 10 each of those, and that's all we've got as we run through our crusade. Then I've got a total of, I got a lot of guys down here. I've got 4 champions, 4 bannermen, and ultimately that is a reflection of the fact that I'm building these lists based on my collection. I only have 12 guys on horses, and I'm probably going to have to put my general and maybe a captain on a horse. If they're on the battlefield at the same time, I've only got 10 additional figures. So we got to make that work. We're going to have to split these guys up. We can't put all 20 knights on the battlefield at the same time, because frankly, I can't put them on the table at the same time. So we know we're going to have a minimum of 2 forces, and probably we'll have like 2 bigger and then 1 or 2 smaller ones led by one of these captains, but we'll get to that. So I got 3 units of 12 archers. I've got 2 units of 10 swordsmen, and then I've got 10 units of 10 spearmen. And I can combine these in any way I want. So that gives me a total of, 15 units, but I could say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and combine 4 of these into a single 40-man block and use them like that. And we can decide that on the fly, if you will. well, we'll have to decide how many are with the army, but then when it comes time to put them on the table, we can, so let's say we've got 60 spearmen. Well, we can put down 2 units of 30, we can put down a unit of 20, a unit of 40, we'll figure something out. But again, I'm limited to, I think, 40 spearmen on the table at any one time, because I've only got 36 spearmen. If I give them both a bannerman and both a champion, that's my 2 blocks of 20. Okay, I may proxy just to round out those numbers a little bit, but that gives you an idea for the forces that are available. Now let's take a look at the forces of the undead, and to get to that, we just go flip the page. How convenient is that? So we've got Lord Blanc John. He's got a Talisman of Protection, and he is a level 2 vampire lord, and his Circle of Death kind of guy. It's a death cult, right? He's got 1 necromancer count, and I think what I did is I took, it's really a vampire count, and there's the necromancer. Sorry, sometimes I say necromancer because it just feels like crow. Anyway, necromancer. He's a level 3 death wizard, so we've got a level 2 and a level 3. And then that's it. Now we do have 3 thralls. These are basically the equivalents of captains. And they're in heavy armor and a shield. One of them has a magic shield. One of them has a biting blade. So again, +1 to the armor save with a magic shield. He's going to be a little stickier. And then Kopel Korinsky has got the biting blade, which is an extra AP 1. And then Dan Pualton here is just, he's just a regular thrall. We have Castle Gallagher. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Castle Gallagher has a garrison. Remember that this is the defensive side. The garrison starts the game with 20 skeletal spearmen and 15 zombies. Then we've got, and now here's where I was talking. We got to kind of look back and forth. Let me stick a pin in this, and we'll come back to it in a moment. Taking a look at the map, it looks a little something like this, and I essentially sat down. I didn't make this completely random. I wanted to give it some thought, and I wanted to make sure that it made some sense. Castle Gallagher is the haunt of Lord Blanc John. That's way up here. Our crusading armies are going to have to come on roads 1, 2, and 3. I don't know which ones. I wanted to have this map. I'm not interested in completely fair and balanced maps here. I don't need this to be symmetric. In fact, I didn't want it symmetric. I wanted to put a nice big river slashing diagonally down the side. I wanted to have a nice big swampy area. I wanted to have a lake that prevents movement across the countryside. And I decided to make all of these roads improved roads. So our armies will be able to move across this map fairly quickly. This is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. We're going to use the standard scale of, I think it's a quarter inch. 1 inch is 20 miles. At 1 inch to 20 miles, we're looking at 160 miles across by 220 miles north to south, which is a fairly large area. It is, depending on where you're at, South Carolina, no, about half the size of South Carolina. Anyway, in good weather, marching along a road, it's going to take you at least 3 weeks to get from one of these entry points up to Castle Gallagher. We have this point down here. This is called Jaycock Wood. We've got the Lost Chapel. Ooh, free power-ups. Down here on the south bank of the Quirk River. And then we've got a troll bridge down here. You gotta love the troll bridge. And then way up here, we've got, what is that called? Wiggly Hill. And then Castle Gallagher, like I said, and Lake Thorpe, and I think that's it. Oh, right, Philematox Swamp. That's this area down here. We'll talk about that in a second. Notice there are only 3 places to cross the Quirk River. Notice also that each of these nodes represents a sort of town or, a linked-in area. The actual, we got 2 different letters here. We've got Z and we've got B. Z represents a village, and B represents a barrow. The village will have a graveyard from which zombies appear. The barrow will have a burial mound from a long ago lost and forgotten battle that will be filled with skeletons. That's an important distinction to make, because when we start our fight, here's how the general lay of the game is going to lie. The Bromans come in the south. And each time they get to one of these nodes, they can spend a full day. In other words, if they don't have the movement to get to that barrow, if they get to that barrow at the very end of the day, they're gonna have to spend the entire next day. And the way we do this, guys, is we will measure out. Now, this is not a particularly artistic representation. It is somewhat of a node, a point-to-point. Not entirely. Your armies move quickly. Typical army, like if you've got all of your foot sloggers hiking along, which we don't have a whole lot of cavalry, they are able to move at, in good weather, I believe it's a half an inch per day. So as you can see, we're 3 days away from this zombie mound right there. If you have a half a day's hike, you got to spend that extra half a day. And then the following day, you can, if you have your priest or your wizard of light, and they spend a full day, they'll zero that out. It is no longer available to the forces of darkness as a point at which they can raise more undead to serve in their armies. Lord Blanc John is caught completely by surprise. The Empire appears here, and basically that first day is them marching into the territory, and then Blanc John is going to send his thralls out. Remember, he's got 3 thralls, and then he's got his necromancer, and I think that's it. And then he can leave on his own as well. Victory conditions for the Romans will be get to Castle Gallagher and kill everyone that's there. If we get to that point and the campaign is still going on, we may do a little bit of a siege there. We'll have to see how that goes. But basically, lay siege and defeat Castle Gallagher, and you have lifted the darkness from the land, and the good people, the hot-blooded, living children of God, can then retake this dark and blasted nightmare land. Alternatively, if the Count can drive the crusading armies off of his territory, then he'll win. And I think you know how these things go. Well, also there's a little stream here. That's kind of neat. And I don't know if Nuala's stream here will make a big difference, but it is one more point at which it takes a full day to cross it with your army. So if you are moving, and here's where I say, to go back to what I was talking about with the point-to-point, the roads are the fastest way to march, but you can march across country at basically it amounts to half speed. And that will become important, because if our crusading army wants to go to the Lost Chapel and bless it, make it holy, then they will receive a reward for that. I've got a magic item planted there, but that is like a 4-day hike to get from the road to the chapel. And then what do, right? You don't want to get caught in the swamp, because the swamp is bad news bears. On the other hand, if you're up here and you see an army that's headed in this direction, there may be points on this map where it makes sense to leave the road, march across country, maybe get behind an enemy. So that's an option. This is not a true point-to-point. Also, the length of each road, of course, as I said, will alter how fast the armies move, and the weather will be a factor as well. We will pick a day in which the crusade begins, and we will roll for weather each day. And even though these are good roads, that will have an effect, particularly because we're hauling those great cannons. 3 days of rain pins those cannons in place. They can no longer move. And the Romans want to move as fast as possible because, as I said, the only forces that are available to the Dark Lord are the forces in Castle Gallagher. He can set out with his 20 skeletal spearmen and his 15 zombies, and they can start marching south. He can send his thralls. He may not want to. He may leave a little reserve force up here. I think he's going to send his thralls out, and they are able to recruit additional people. So for each cemetery, that's each of the Z's on the map, when they get to that cemetery and they spend a day performing a rite, they can summon 10 plus 1d10 zombies. Look at that. We might generate another force. And as you see, I've got a pretty good spread. Z is over here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I thought there were 5. There should be 5 Z's on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is. The rest are B's. Well, what about Wiggly Hill up here? Well, that's a special kind of hill because it's got a... where is it? Here, Wiggly Burrow. If you can get one of your boys up there, you can generate 1 Banshee. What? And then 2 Banshees? I'm not sure why I wrote down 2 things here. Picking up a Banshee might not be a bad idea. I think it means the first time you go there, there's 1, and the second time you get 2 Banshees. Or maybe you spend 2 days. Oh, no, I know what it is. This may be a random thing where, like, You're likely going to get 1 or 2 Banshees based on a die roll. We'll flesh that out a little bit later. Jaycock Wood, of course, that's down here. And immediately upon the start of the campaign, Lord Blanc can summon 12 direwolves, 3 bat swarms. Oh, there's 2 of those in there. He can summon them and he can send them down to start blocking the enemy's forces. Or he can summon them to connect with one of his armies. Bear in mind, these undead forces don't need to rest on the Lord's Day. Our Crusaders can march 6 days. Day 7, they have to do nothing. They have to rest. The zombies don't have to do that. So the undead forces will have basically that little 1/7 bump to their speed because they can just, and technically I guess you could probably do like a march through the night thing, but even these thralls got to sleep. Even a dark wizard of the death, Diob Zela, even he's got to sleep sometime. So our thralls go out. They hit a burrow. What happens then? Well, the burrow, we're going to roll a d6. And on 1 through 5, we'll generate 10 plus 1d10 skeletons. And on a 6, we'll recruit 10 grave guards. And the grave guards are a lot tougher. They've got heavy armor, sword. There's a 50% chance they've got spear, and a 50% chance they've got hand weapons. For the standard barrow, I keep saying burrow, I mean barrow. I guess a barrow is a kind of burrow. It's a skeleton burrow. We call them barrows. So that 10 to 20 skeletons, there's a 1 in 6 chance that they've got a bow. Otherwise, they've all got spears. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at here for this campaign. We're going to send our Dark Lord's forces out to start recruiting, and obviously they're going to have a much easier time recruiting north of the Quirk River. Obviously, the forces of the Empire are going to be able to knock off some of these, but they're going to have some choices to make. Do we want to spend the day and slow down? Every day they spend south of the river gives the Vampire Lord another day to march over and recruit and add to the size of his forces. This is complicated enough that I don't really have any idea how well this campaign is going to go. We may generate 2 battles and it's a foregone conclusion and we knock off right there. It's possible. I'm okay with that. We're kind of running an experiment. And like I said, there's not a lot of guys doing long form map-based, this level of detail kind of campaign here on the YouTubes, or maybe even where you're at. If you've done a campaign like this, let me know, would you? There's one other thing I should talk about. That's the little trolls down here. I put a troll bridge. There are 5 trolls, and is going to be some rules. Do I have another page with rules for the trolls? They're a neutral party that when you get there, you can recruit them. The good guys can recruit them as well. We may wind up doing like a die roll. If you roll a 1 through 6, I wish I would have written that down somewhere because I had a really good idea for that one. But essentially, there's a chance that you have to fight them, there's a chance that they'll join your side, and there's a chance that they just ignore you because they don't care. Again, we may make that kind of a time penalty, and we may make it take a full day to cross your force across the bridge if your force is bigger than some kind of point cost. Like more than if it's just a little war band, they'll be able to filter across. But if you've got a giant army, like a 3,000 point army, then it's going to take you a full day to cross. And of course, you can't cross anywhere else because the river's up. The other thing I'll point out is that our terrain for the battles will largely depend, it'll largely be random, right? If we're in the swamps, there's going to be a lot more like uncrossable terrain and water features. If you're over here near the woods, we'll have a lot more woods. But generally speaking, when our armies meet, most of the time they should be meeting on the road somewhere. And when they meet on the road, we'll use the typical random generation. And that'll give us another point of interest. There's a lot of blank spaces on the map just begging to be filled in. And I think you'd be surprised how often there are, just because of the construction of the map and where these nodes are located and the distances between, what we have found in the past is that there are certain points on a map like this that are magnets. They just have a gravity to themselves that you may wind up fighting multiple battles in this same area, strangely enough. And we'll have to record what the terrain looks like there in case our 2 forces meet in that area again. We may wind up sending some reinforcements up if the Bromans are doing well. but their numbers are seriously depleted because this is the other thing we need to talk about. As I said, that we have a limited roster here, and we need to figure out what happens at the end of a battle. We sent our Knights of the Lamb charging into the other guys, and they got blasted. They suffered 4 figures worth of casualties. And I guess it's probably worth pointing out, each one of our figures is going to represent, let's just keep it a nice round, 10 guys, okay? So we've got 200 Knights is what we have coming in with us. We send 100 Knights charging at the enemy, we lose 4 figures. Okay, and the other 6 break and run. All right, since they're Knights, they're going to be able to get away, no problem. That's going to largely be a judgment call at the time. If you suffer a defeat in the swamp, if the Bromans suffer a defeat in the swamp, they ain't getting away. That could wind up being a total party wipe. But in an area like this, or if they're right near the bridge and the only way out is across a bridge and they suffer a terrible defeat, again, they're going to suffer far heavier casualties than if they're just on the road somewhere and there's lots of different places to run. Worse casualties north, lesser casualties south, but not all casualties are created the same. So we've lost 4 of our guys. The other 6 got away. When we take a look at what happens, generally what we do is we treat half of these guys are dead, half of these guys are going to be injured, and they're going to require a week before they are able to get back into the fight. So we may send those 6 guys in as a unit, or we may hunker down for a week until we get those other 2 guys back, because 8 Knights is better than 6. Math is fundamental. So that's kind of what we're looking at. That's what our campaign looks like. It's wildly different from most of the things you've seen before. And I guess the last thing that we need to talk about, so we talked about casualties. We could probably start laying out some strategies for our boys, but I'm going to hold off until our next video where we figure out exactly when are we starting in the year, and then we can actually sit down and figure out what our force rosters are going to be. Again, we're going to lean on Sylvester, and Sylvester says, look, if you're solo wargaming, here's what you're going to do. You're going to come up with 3 strategies, and one of our strategies may be send everybody by the most direct route possible, separate them by about 2 days, and all 3 of our forces are going to rush Castle Gallagher at once. One of our strategies may be nice even spread. Make it as even as possible. Send 3 armies up to cross the bridge at 3 points and just overwhelm the forces, right? And knock off, bless each one of these. Maybe we even push the frontier back to the Cork River and we call that a victory. Hey, we just liberated half of the territory from the undead forces. That may be a victory for them. On the other hand, our third strategy may be, let's go ahead and send our strongest army. We'll send a weak army kind of racing up and trying to knock off as many of these reinforcement points as possible. We'll send a blocking army up, and then we'll send our heaviest guys, up the middle. Or maybe we send that heavy unit up this way with a light forces up there. You know what I mean? That's kind of, and so what you do, now here's what you do to keep yourself on your toes. You figure out what those 3 strategies are. And before you roll a d6 to find out which strategy will be implemented, you develop 3 strategies for the forces of darkness. Are we going to send our thralls out and defend the 3 bridges? Gather what forces you can, right? We may send a guy over, ping, 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 ping. We may send a guy around this way. We may send a 3rd guy around like this. We're going to defend all 3 bridges. That's one possibility. A second possibility is send a guy down as fast as possible to meet this force, right? Just get as many guys down there as possible. Send 2 down as fast as possible. Send a 3rd up to create a reserve force, I guess you could say. That after these 2 fall, then you can decide which way to send that reserve force. So that would, I think, be our 3rd strategy. In fact, I think we just did it, didn't we? Let me grab some dice. On second thought, let's hold it right there. We've been at this for about a half an hour. Let's call a timeout. And in our next episode, we'll write down, and here's the key, write down those 3 strategies before you roll the dice. It helps to keep you honest as to what your intentions are for those strategies. The other thing we'll do is we'll compile, once we have the strategies in hand, then we can take some time and compile the actual army lists for the 3 armies, for 2 to 3 armies on each side. One last thing I'll point out. If you look at this map, you realize that there's really not as many forces available point-wise to the vampire count. I don't think I mentioned, once per week, the vampire count's forces can recruit from each of these locations. So when they recruit, we'll write the day down that the thrall summoned forth the zombies or the skeletons. And then, actually what we'll do is we'll write down the next day that forces will be available from that point. So if they are defeated in battle and retreat back along the line, if they can stay a day or two ahead of the Crusaders, they'll be able to pick up additional forces along the way. And what that does is it forces the Crusaders to be as aggressive as possible. They can't just hang back and lick their wounds and wait for their guys to recover and win that war of attrition, because they're going to lose. If they take too much time, they're going to find themselves fighting a freshly replenished army of the dead. So keep that in mind as well. And as I said, next time we'll figure out what the strategies are, build some armies, and if we have time, we'll keep the videos about 30 minutes. But if we have time, we'll measure out that first week or 2 of the campaign and see where the initial battles are going to be fought. And then in episode 3, we'll fight that first battle. Till then, I'm praying for you.